Welcome to Dialogues at Fulcrum, where we have conversations with experts and analysts on the latest geopolitical, economic, and cultural developments in Southeast Asia.
A very good morning to our listeners. This is the podcast at Fulcrum, the commentary and analysis website for the IC's Yusof Ishak Institute. My name is Julia Lau. I'm the coordinator of the Indonesia Studies program, as well as one of the editors for Fulcrum. This morning, I'm very pleased to have my colleague Dr Yanuar Nugroho, who is Senior Visiting Fellow with us at the Indonesia Studies program, to talk about policy continuity and institutional readiness in Indonesia's capital city relocation. Good morning, Yanuar.
Good morning, Julia.
So today is July 8th, and we happen to be having a symposium on Nusantara, IKN, otherwise known as the new capital city of Indonesia. It's been over 5 years since Nusantara was initiated as a strategic agenda item under the previous Indonesian president, Pak Joko Widodo. Now we have new president. So Yanwa, can you first maybe give us a quick overview of how you think the current president, Prabowo Subianto, has dealt with this mega project since he took over last year in late October?
Thank you. I think that's a good starting point, Julia, for the conversation. I think one thing that I would want to make it clear is that I think the political continuity is intact. So, despite not initiating the project, I think President Prabowo reaffirmed support, both politically and financially. You may have heard that he just announced the budget cut for 2025, right? Despite that, his administration actually approved 48.8 trillion rupiah for 2025 to 2029 funding for IKN. So even amid fiscal tightening, President Prabowo seemed to show his commitment. Why I mention this? Because I think Prabowo actually could have scaled back or even delayed IKN, but instead he chose to maintain it. I think he want to signal that IKN is a cross administration strategic project. However, however, IKN is not listed as a top 5 priority in his midterm development planning. So I think, although this is quite symbolic, but I think it's important for us to keep monitoring how IKN goes forward.
That's a nice sort of succinct answer, and I think you do make a good point. There is definitely political will to continue with the project under Prabowo. So we'll turn to a second question, which is related to this uncertainty idea. Do you think there's a risk still that this project might someday be abandoned? If it's not by Prabowo, then possibly by whoever becomes president after him, uh, and maybe become a white elephant, or are we safely past that phase? Right? Are we safely past this danger of abandonment? For instance, are we now seeing some real money being put into Nusantara? We definitely have seen the completion of some core government buildings, right, including the housing for civil servants. There's some new announcements about civil servants going to be relocated to Nusantara, possibly even by this year, 2025. So as you say, phase two is now in play. What are some of the key challenges that you foresee, and are any of the challenges from phase one still lingering in phase two? And what might be some of the notable accomplishments that you've seen, or milestones to tell us actually IKN is moving along and it's successful, maybe a too generous a word, but that it's moving along and progress is being made.
Wow, so many questions in
Yeah,
your
yeah, yeah.
second question.
Big
But
question.
okay. Let me try to answer in turn. So I think, Julia, you have witnessed what happened in Indonesia over the past, I would say, decades. I mean, from administration to new administrations, there are always things that I would say sometimes either abandoned or canceled. If you remember Hambalang, you remember Meikarta, those projects, right? And I think it's justifiable for people to think whether Nusantara IKN will have the same fate. So I think this is my opinion. But I think the risk of IKN being abandoned is receding, but not fully gone. That's how I will formulate it. Because if I if I and reflected what happened during Pak Jokowi, and probably I even took some, I would say, credit in pushing that idea, was that Pak Jokowi's strategy was to push things as much as possible so there would be no turning point. That was his strategy, actually. And I think it worked because until now, this is my data, core government buildings, presidential palace, ministerial offices, and 47 apartment towers are already 80% completed. So if you go to IKN, you will see that. And then more than 62 trillion rupiah of investment are already committed. So not just MOU, although they are mainly domestic. I know that the downside would be until today, there is still no major foreign investment or investors coming. Uh, so when you ask whether the project would be abandoned, whether that risk is gone, not entirely gone, but I think we see some. I would say this becomes like an arena for not negotiation probably, but to see whether this can be really brought forward. So you were asking about the challenges for phase 2 and probably phase 3. So I think I listed some. Number one is about private capital beyond PPP, beyond public-private partnerships, whether the project can really attract money from private sectors. Because this is impossible if it is just the government's project alone. Second, you already mentioned about civil service relocation readiness, right? And that is the challenge. The third challenge is whether we can avoid, I would say, Jakarta-centric rebound. So whether we can maintain dual core balance between IKN and Jakarta. And the last challenge for the phase 2 and 3, I think, is managing local discontent and environmental costs. We cannot, uh, neglect the fact about that. So, with that, my take would be that the success indicators, if I may say so, is that the mobility of civil service, we call it ASN in Bahasa Indonesia, mobility of our civil service should be put in place, should be harmonized. That's the first indicator. If it happens, then we can say, okay, this is ticked. Second, whether the OIKN, the authority of IKN, managed to streamline the regulatory process, a regulatory framework for especially licensing, because the investors, when they come, they would want to know to what extent I can access things. Third, transparency in land acquisition. This is quite detailed, but I think this is one of the core of the problem, one of the root of the problem. The next one is whether the foreign co-investors or credible foreign co-investors are really materialized. Because until now, it's promise, the Seagulf, the
Should
one
I
from,
ask?
yeah.
Should I ask whether there are foreign investors who have not been credible?
Well, I think they're credible, but I mean, the credibility, because sometimes, sorry to be very, very blunt, but what happens in the negotiation table are often being sugar-coated
Yeah,
by
of
Indonesian
course.
government, of course. And then I think this is what I meant by credible. It's not the investors, but the process. And then the last success indicators would be integration of indigenous communities. Because if we cannot integrate them in the planning, I think the worry that has been addressed by many, especially civil society organizations, uh, would become reality. IKN will be the second, will be Jakarta 2.0, in which, Betawi people are being swept out from Jakarta, and no Betawi communities are enjoying the city. So I think that's my take.
That's great. I may
Long question.
actually, yeah, we have a few more questions, but I may actually flip the order. Have you heard, and it can be a no, is there any initial feedback or response from any of the civil servants who have already moved to Nusantara?
Yep, I heard some, Julia. So the feedback, I think the feedback is still emerging, but the what we have not and what I have heard is that it is about limited amenities and social facilities. Second, it is about the family issue, family separation. So housing readiness are uneven. I mean, if you are echelon 1 or echelon 2, you can have larger house in which your family can come join you. But if you are, I would say, lower than that rank, you will have to stay in, we call it rumah susun. What do you call it here? Rumah susun is like, government housing, basically like flats. Um, they're decent. I mean, for you to live there, but for you to really take your family with you, if you have two kids and wife or husband, and then you will live there. So that's not really appropriate. And then lack of regulatory clarity on entitlements. I have heard this from some of my friends, even that when you come there, it's not clear. Some officials are entitled to get, flight tickets, return flight tickets once a month to visit their family in Jakarta or in Java. Some can get two, some can get more, salary increase. So it's not clear, not standardized. So I think this is what is being worked out by the Ministry of Administrative Reform, PAN-RP, and they're trying to harmonize this human resource and reallocation systems or relocation systems of this civil service. I know that this is not exhaustive, but this is what I heard from my colleagues, from my friends, because although I'm not a civil service, but some of my colleagues, especially more junior one, they came to me and asked my opinion. So I noted the challenges that they are facing when they move to IKN. Again, this is quite early feedback from, I would say, relocated civil services, but we need to really take it into account when we talk about the full scale moving of civil service, because in total we have around, I think, across ministries we have nearly 3 million civil service, but I think at the core, probably 500,000 to 700,000 civil service. So, I mean, if they move to IKN, you you get that number times four, with wife or husband or spouse, basically, and kids. So we are looking at around 2.8 to 3 million people moving into new capital.
It's certainly not
I
not
know,
not
yeah,
ready yet for
clearly,
that
clearly, yeah.
number, which actually brings us now to the question of governance, right?
Uh-huh.
So last June, a little bit abruptly, the leadership of OIKN changed. Now the current OIKN head is the
Abasuki.
former Abasuki,
Yeah.
who gave our keynote address this morning, the former Public Works Minister. So at the same status as a ministry, right, which is what OEKN is, it directly reports to the president. Do you think that has helped Nusantara to be implemented in that sense more quickly, or is it in and of itself an impediment, maybe because then it depends on maybe the president's attention, right? Whether the president has time to think, and like you said earlier, it is not listed in the top 5 strategic projects, so this general idea of governance and also linked to what you were just saying about management of civil servants, which is a big task, right? How does that all fall today?
Probably my answer would be maybe 80% technical, but 20% rather political. Looking at this, I mean, your question is when I thought about this. Of course, there are some technical aspects, Julia. One, we know that Pak Basuki, I mean, he not only survived Jokowi's 2 periods, but he excelled. He is one of the exceptional ministers whose works are known by everyone in Indonesia. In bahasa Indonesia, we have the so-called tangan dingin. That everything that he touches is done. He is the one who gets things done. So uh, I think why Pak Prabowo chose Pak Basuki to replace Pak Bambang Susantono. I think this is uh, a signal or a symbol that Prabowo prefer for. I wonder whether this wording sufficient or not, but engineering-led stability. So he is a military man. He knows how to handle infrastructure project. And I think the choice of Pak Prabowo to choose Pak Basuki, I think that justifies his approach. Second, I think it also signals the so-called technocratic continuity, and it also reduces perception that IKN is merely symbolical or political. So it gives signal that it is technocratic, right? Making it less political. Although at the same time, it signals a political sign that I'm continuing what Jokowi has started. The third one, I think, the ministerial or quasi-ministerial status of OIKN, which enable the authority to report directly to the president. I think it is vital for cross-sectoral coordination. I remember what late Pak Kuntoro did during the Aceh reconstruction after tsunami. BRR, Badan Rekonstruksi dan Rehabilitasi, Rehabilitation and Reconstruction Agency of Aceh, and NIAS at that time, was also similar to this OIKN. So it has cross-sectoral coordination, and Pak Kuntoro, as far as I knew, because I learned directly from him, he exercised it. This is what I haven't seen, however, in OIKN. So I remember Pak Kuntoro told me and our colleagues at the time how he wanted all the permit process, for example, to be done from Aceh, not from Jakarta. So all cross-ministerial coordinations was done from Aceh. I would expect actually Pak Basuki to do the same with OIKN, with all process being done not in Jakarta but in Kalimantan, to make sure that this coordination really happens. So those are the things that I would uh, comprehend how Pak Prabowo now chooses Pak Basuki and how he wants OIKN to be run. Although again, it is not even listed in the top 5 priorities. But I think Pak Prabowo would want to signal to the public and also political signal that he continues Pak Jokowi's legacy. So because if you remember during his campaign, he said that I'm bringing the torch from Pak Jokowi. And one project that at the time was highly contested was IKN. If you remember, Anies even said, I will cancel it. Pak Ganjar, okay, let me evaluate here and there. But Pak Prabowo clearly, I will continue. Now, people were skeptical actually why IKN was not listed as even top 5. But then, and also IKN was only given 48.8 trillion compared to 20 trillion that was spent by Pak Jokowi only for 2 years, for example. But then I think this appointment of Pak Basuki and the whole governance sort of represents this political signal from Prabowo. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a comprehensive answer, and I think you're right that you can't really separate the political from the so-called technocratic side of things. You need a technocrat, but you also need someone who's more like a general, if you will, right, marshalling the resources. So today we're having this symposium. Our scholars, some of them will talk about environmental degradation and land rights. You mentioned that a bit in connection with Nusantara's construction. Do you think enough has been done to address some of the worst concerns raised by the residents as well as civil society, especially the indigenous tribes and the people who call the hills of Nusantara home? I think that's probably one of the biggest negatives coming out of the construction, and not just Indonesians care about it, but very famously, I think it was earlier this year, there was a science report that talked about Nusantara being one of the regions where mosquitoes were
I
carrying
remember
disease.
that. Yeah.
And I think everyone is worried about it in the sense of, we know development generally brings with it a combination of good and bad, but uh, you know do you think enough has been done right now to address these concerns, right? So environment plus land rights, or you can take them separately.
Yep. If you ask whether it is enough, no, it's not enough. Yeah, they have done some, but it is not enough. I think the first thing that we need to remember, Julia, is that East Kalimantan is not in Latin. It's not terra nullius, it's not empty canvas. It is home to indigenous Dayak communities, customary landholders, and also critical ecosystems. This is the first thing that we need to remember. And I remember in our symposium a few years ago here in ISIS, I think this was discussed quite extensively. So that is the fact. So what I have learned, there are ongoing reports of a few things. Number one, land reclassification without free prior informed consent. So they changed the status of land from, for example, forest into different land use, which are used by the capital, for example. Second, involuntary resettlement. And I think what is worrying that it is done with minimal consultation. So they are being forced to move, and then deforestation in buffer zones. And I think if you go online, you can find easily because it is documented by Walhi. Walhi is the Indonesian environmental NGO, and also Greenpeace. They even had the NASA picture imaging from the satellite, how the deforestation in buffer zones of IKN is taking place. And the last one is that despite AMDAL is basically environmental assessment and safeguards, I think enforcement and transparency are lacking. So these are the challenges that we have in developing Nusantara when we talk about environment and also indigenous people's right. So I think uh, if we are going forward, if we are continuing this, I think with regards to this, at least there are three things that I would deem necessary. One, it is the recognition of customary rights. They are there, but the rights are not really, acknowledged. So, if Pak Basuki, the next administrations can take this in this phase two and phase three seriously, it is the recognition of customary rights. The second is, I know this may sound idealistic, but genuine participation in spatial planning. Because there are sites who are sacred to indigenous communities, there are sites who are protected by them, what they should do, what they should build over there, who can live, who can stay there. And the third one is long term ecological impact monitoring. And to some extent, when you do infrastructure project, usually there are land that you first cleared, but then you didn't use it anymore, or you don't use it anymore, right? They need the so-called reclamation or restoration. So that kind of restoration is also needed. So long-term ecological impact monitoring and this kind of restoration or reclamation is important. So that's what I would think.
No, I think what you mentioned, and you kind of have to be idealistic. If you're not, then you wouldn't even think that's possible to
Yeah,
think about.
yeah.
Final question. You know, looking at the current administration, we've gone through sort of the political will, the whether it's out of the danger phase. Going forward, what are some of the strategic recommendations you might? So you had one which was to centralize more
Yeah,
of the decision making
yeah,
and
yeah,
analysis in OIKN, which you don't think is being done quite yet. So it's still looking towards Jakarta, ironically, right?
yeah.
So I think that's a good overall strategic recommendation. So any others, whether it's in terms of how do we then think about improving financing, improving interagency and interministry work, or improving reporting on the progress of OIKN, not just within government but to the public. I think there's also a sense that there's not a systematic way they are updating the general public about Nusantara. And continuity. So again, these are big areas. Choose anyone or answer all if you wish.
Yep. I think few. Well, I wouldn't dare to say advice. I'm not advising the government that sense,
Recommendation.
but maybe
Recommendation.
probably a recommendation based on the analysis. I try to group into four. The first is on the public-private financing, which is all about synchronization. So we need the clear investment phasing and then improve the OIKN licensing turnaround. We need to improve that and offer guarantees and explore uh, whatever you call it, diaspora or green or sovereign funds. So these three things on the synchronization of public-private financing. Clear investment phasing, improving OIKN licensing, and offer guarantees and explore other type of funding. The second recommendation is about interministerial coordination. To me, this is one of the most important because, as far as I understand how the government works, this is where all troubles started. But also, if we can do something about this, this can be, a breakthrough. I think it is important to create permanent interagency secretariat under OIKN. Second, I don't know whether it is too much to ask or not, but this kind of project needs presidential oversight. I remember my time when I was in the office of the president, even Pak Jokowi or Pak Bambang Yudhoyono at that time, he did himself, Pak Jokowi control the, toll road. He asked me, Pak Yanuar sudah berapa kilometer, how many kilometers are there? Can I call those in the field? So this kind of oversight is important. And then for the public, I'm thinking about progress dashboards that people can check. Uh, I try to exercise and experiment this with SDGs, Julia. If you go to sdgs.bapnas.go.id, you will see the progress of SDGs real time. We can do this. So this is important. The third area of recommendation is on the inclusive development. I think it is important to embed, to integrate the indigenous voices in governance. You need to have representative and avoid extractive models. I think regenerative planning is important. And lastly, on the continuity, you mentioned about continuity. It has never been done, but I'm thinking of something called PSN Plus. PSN Plus. PSN is program project strategis nasional, national strategic project. But we put it plus status so that it, you know, it represents that this is cross administrations. I don't know whether it is possible or not, but this is just my thinking. If is it possible to do this breakthrough? And then what surprised me was IKN was not put into RPJMN and RPJP, the midterm planning. So can we do this now? Well, we can revise midterm planning and long-term planning. And while we talk about presidential oversight, I also wonder whether we can build something like cross-party oversight mechanisms, so that you are not
You
uh,
mean political parties?
political parties, yeah, because because different political parties will have different things, and I think different ideas, and that the next election with the zero threshold, anything can happen from any party, although we suspect that the old players will remain. However, if we can have this oversight cross political party or in the parliament together with the president oversight, that would be interesting. I know that these are still quite experimental even, but I would want to see if IKN is to be continued, and this is the future of Indonesia. So I think we need to be really serious on that. That's it.
Sort of all hands on deck. You can't have any key ministry or any key party not involved in
Yeah.
if you're truly serious about moving your capital to Nusantara. Well, terima kasih banyak as
Sama-sama.
always. Thank
Mbak
you
Julia.
for sharing your insights with us. And I think even though you say some of your ideas are idealistic, I think that's what is required out of the box thinking for Nusantara, because it's going to be with the country such a long time if it progresses. Well, with that, we end our podcast. Thank you so much. And hopefully this gets lots of listeners.
Okay. Thank you very much, Julia. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for joining us in our conversation on Dialogues at Fulcrum. If you want to access more of our analysis on Southeast Asia, please check out fulcrum.sg. Dialogues at Fulcrum is brought to you by the ISIS Yusof Ishak Institute. We look forward to sharing more insightful conversations with you in subsequent episodes. See you then!